Let's see. Okay, right. What I've got is a list that I'm going to read for anybody out there that needs to work on their inner critic. Pete Walker, in the book Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, he mentions that we've got to deal with the inner critic as being number one when we're dealing with complex PTSD. So CPTSD is not a disorder. It's through trauma that we get this, and we've got to basically, to heal it, we've got to understand what we're doing. So the book is below the link. You'll see the book below the link. Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving. It's free on Audible USA, and it's free on Audible, also Kindle, Amazon UK. So do check the links out below. I'm going to read through 14 common inner critic attacks divided into the key categories, and this is what you need to work on. So we need to work on any perfectionism, because perfectionism, as Pete Walker says, it arises out as an attempt to gain safety and support in a dangerous family. And perfection is a self-persecutory myth. He says here, I do not have to be perfect to be safe or loved in the present. I am letting go of relationships that require perfection. I have a right to make mistakes, and mistakes do not make me a mistake. Every mistake or mishap is an opportunity to practice loving myself in the places I have never been loved. So when we've been through childhood trauma, what can happen is that we can think when we're small, it's because we're doing something wrong or because we're not good enough. So then we'll go into adult relationships or any, situation, thinking that when people are not nice to us, it's because there's something wrong with us and we're not good enough or perfect enough. So we need to knock that on the head. Then we've got number 2 of the 14 common inner critic attacks is all or nothing, all or none, and black and white thinking. So what we need to do then is say or think to ourselves, and the list is below this video as well, is all or none and black and white thinking. I reject extreme or overgeneralized descriptions, judgments, or criticism. One negative happenstance does not mean I am stuck in a never-ending pattern of defeat. Statements that describe me as always or never, this or that, are typically grossly inaccurate. And, I've had people do this with me, saying, you do something, and then somebody might say to you, you always do that. And we never always do anything. So, we've got to pick ourselves up on that sort of self-talk where we're saying, I'm always late, or I always get it wrong, all right? Just simple things, where we knock ourselves, like I always forget people's names. We just got to readdress our thinking and really begin to look at the language we're using in our day-to-day lives and start listening to that inner critic so that we can begin to eliminate it. The way I got rid of mine, not 100%, but and people who've not had abuse, have got this inner critic. It's just that when you get it from childhood, it's far more, imprinted into us. And the only way that I managed to really begin to deal with it was by telling it to bugger off, which is, maybe some people aren't going to like that word, but that's what I did with mine. And sometimes I was even a little bit more fierce in my language with my inner critic, which eventually meant that when my inner critic pops up now, I knock it out the way really quickly. I don't sort of bathe in it. I sort of become aware of it and say, oh, well, that's what I'm doing. And then I, do what I need to do, tell it to go away, and in a fierce way. And then you'll get better and better at it, but you have to work it. It's not going to go away on its own, because you've been, conditioned, and the imprinting can be very deep in us when we're kids. So we've got to do this and adult ourselves, parent ourselves. Number 3 is self-hate, self-disgust, and toxic shame. So here he says, Pete Walker, I commit to myself, I am on my side, I am a good enough person, and I refuse to trash myself. I turn shame back into blame and disgust and externalize it to anyone who shames my normal feelings and foibles. So if people shame you for having normal feelings and foibles, you've got to call them out on it. We don't have to put up with people, shaming us for feeling sad or for feeling, angry about something that happened to us. We've got to go through our feelings in order to evolve them. Suppressing feelings will cause things like disassociation. You know, people, if we're suppressing stuff, we do that through, some people will do it through food, some people will do it through alcohol, or, you know, overuse of social media and, you know, just scrolling through Instagram, stuff like that. So we need to really look at how we disassociate as well. He said, here he says as well, Pete Walker says, as long as I'm not hurting anyone, so, you know, I refuse to be shamed for normal emotional responses like anger, sadness, fear, and depression. So we can have something, you know, called healthy anger. In spirituality, that's, you know, anger is pretty knocked a lot, you know, that you're not allowed to feel angry. Anger is quite a useful thing in the world because it means that people will stand up and, you know, stand their ground on certain things. And if we look back in history, people, women, or not just women, but one woman, Rosa Parks, when she said, you know, she was asked to stand up, she was sitting on a bus and asked to stand up so a white person could sit down. If Rosa Parks, you know, didn't get angry or feel anger about that, she would have not, you know, she would have just kept conforming. So anger about a situation, sometimes we need anger in order to change things in this world, but healthy anger. He also says, I especially refuse to attack myself for how hard it is to completely eliminate the self-hate habit. So again, we're not knocking ourselves, we're just becoming aware of how we talk to ourselves. Number 4, he talks about micromanagement, worrying and obsessing and looping and over futurizing. So here he suggests saying, I will not repetitively examine details over and over. I will not jump to negative conclusions, and I will not endlessly second guess myself. So sometimes, you know, we have a gut feeling about something, you know, that we can feel inside when we're making a decision. It can be a yes or a no, and we have to get in tune with ourselves. And part of that's, you know, getting rid of that inner critic as well, that's not going to tell us that we're wrong for something that's quite healthy for us to do, you know, the changes we need to make. He also says, you know, we cannot change the past. I cannot change the past. I forgive all of my own past mistakes. I cannot make the future perfectly safe. And we know that as well. None of us can make the future perfectly safe. I will stop hunting for what could go wrong. So that's something we can do. We stop looking for things that could go wrong, because most things we worry about never happen anyway. I know that myself in reality. I will not try to control the uncontrollables. So we've got to, you know, sort of learn to sit back and breathe and not think that we have to control everything. There are some things in life that are uncontrollable. Here he says, I will not micromanage myself or others. So, you know, we don't need to, you know, be micromanaging ourselves or others. And he says, I work in a way that is, or we can say to ourselves, I work in a way that is good enough. And I accept, next page, I accept the existential fact that my efforts sometimes bring desired results and sometimes they do not. So in life, you know, sometimes we're going to do things that will bring desired results and sometimes they're not. He suggests a little prayer here, which is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. But again, with any of these things, and even prayer, it's not to bypass reality, you know, be real with yourself and talk to friends who do, you know, understand your reality, even your past reality, your history, because you're going to need to verbal ventilate. We can have also number 5, unfair devaluing comparisons. So to others or to one's most perfect moments. I refuse to compare myself unfavorably to others. I will not compare my insides to their outsides. I will not judge myself for not being at peak performance all of the time. In a society that pressures us into acting happy all of the time, I will not get down on myself for feeling bad. So that's another good one to, you know, put into effect and understand, to stop the unfair devaluing comparisons, which is a bit difficult in the world, but we have to train ourselves, you know. So I threw out my television in 2012, so that was one good thing I did. And I don't read magazines and stuff like that. So, you know, I'm not comparing myself, but a lot of that can happen on social media too, where we're comparing our lives to other people's. And we've got to remember that most people are posting the good stuff. So be aware not to compare yourself with other people. Number 6, guilt. Feeling guilty does not mean that I am guilty. I refuse to make my decisions and choices from guilt. So, you know, if you've got to make a decision or a choice, you know, look at it and decide, you know, am I giving my yes because I feel guilty? Because sometimes we can, you know, because of consensus reality and the belief systems that people have, consensus means you know, the majority of people, you know, like the majority of people believe that we've all got to forgive no matter what's happened. And with CPTSD, because of the nature of flashbacks and because of the imprints were so early in childhood, we've got to process it and we've got to grieve. So, and then you come to your own conclusion about what you want to do with regard to forgiveness. And it's not written in stone that that's what we have to do to heal. Sometimes I need to feel the guilt and do it anyway. So sometimes you're going to feel guilty about something, and you know, you're going to have to, like saying no, you can feel guilty for saying no to somebody, but you're going to have to say no anyway. In the inevitable instance, when I inadvertently hurt someone, I will apologize, make amends, and let go of my guilt. So we all sometimes hurt, you know, maybe in our tone, or we might say something to somebody and we might hurt them. And it's, you know, we can just look at ourselves, and it's okay to apologize, but going around apologizing for things we have not done, and that's called fawn in the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, which Pete Walker talks about. That would be the fawn. Like, you know, I'm going to be subservient and say sorry for something I've not done. That's not the way to go. So we've got to, you know, parent ourselves and stand up for our inner child. I will not apologize over and over. What I found myself for years, because of where I'd come from as a kid, you know, as a child, I'd basically keep saying sorry for, you know, just being alive. Basically, I kept saying sorry to people for no reason whatsoever. And I call myself out on that now. I do it very occasionally now. Like, I'll say sorry for things that I don't need to say sorry for. So we've got to watch that language as well, because we don't need to be sorry, you know, for breathing, if you get what I'm saying. We're allowed to be, it's almost like a feeling of maybe being inferior, like, you know, you're sort of like an inferior, if I can put it that way. I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but it's a feeling like I'm not good enough, and so I've got to apologize for just being who I am. So we can also take on, I am no longer a victim, because when we're adults, we're beyond that victim, you know, status. For some people, you know, they're going to be in situations that are really out of control. So, and particularly if you come from childhood trauma, we can get codependent and be in relationships that are really unhealthy for us and really damaging for our self-esteem. So we need to look at who we're interacting with. And if we've got people in our lives that are treating us similar to the way we were abused in childhood, you know, that same sort of energy, we really need to look at it. You know, we don't have to be in relationships that are abusive or unkind, or, you know, where there's wickedness going on. So also he says, I will not accept unfair blame. So, you know, if we've hurt somebody, then we can take responsibility, but don't take responsibility, you know, where it's not yours, if you've not done something, because guilt, he also says, sometimes camouflages fear. You know, I am afraid, but I am not guilty or in danger. So sometimes we can just be fearful. Then he says about shoulding, the great word to look at, where we should ourselves. You know, I should, you know, go to bed at a particular time. I should do this. I should do that. Should is going to make you feel really guilty. So that's another word to really take on board. So here at number 7 of the list of the 14 common inner critic attacks, he says, I will substitute the words want to for should. So for instance, let's say you've got things you want to do, like I want to go to the gym, instead of I should go to the gym and I should, you know, drink 4 glasses of water a day and I should be in bed by, you know, midnight or whatever. You know, start saying I want to go to, I want, you know, change it, because should causes a lot of guilt in people, the word should. So then he says here, I'm going to read this bit again. Shoulding, I will substitute the words want to for should and only follow this imperative if it feels like I want to, unless I am under legal, ethical or moral obligation. Number 8, overproductivity, workaholism, and busyholism. So we got to watch out for this because we're human. He says, I am a human being, not a human doing. I will not choose to be perpetually productive. I am more productive in the long run when I balance work and play with relaxation. I will not try to perform at 100% all of the time. Because again, if we try and perform at 100% all of the time, sometimes we get tired. Sometimes we need to, just sit for 10 minutes and just breathe and just, stare out a window or something. We've got to treat ourselves like human beings in a really gentle way. He says here, I subscribe to the normalcy of facilitating along a continuum of efficiency. So, we move forward, we take a break, we move forward, we take a break. Number 9, harsh judgments of self and others and name calling. And this is a really good one for me to address for all of us as well. He says, harsh judgments of self and others and name calling. I will not let the bullies and critics of my early life win by joining and agreeing with them. I refuse to attack myself or abuse others. I will not displace the criticism and blame that rightfully belongs to them onto myself or current people in my life. So if you've got people you love in your life, sometimes what might happen when you go into flashback or you feel a bit out of control, you might project that inner stuff onto the person you love, or you might do it to your own children, or you might do it to, whoever is out there. Human beings do this. We've got to, really get in touch with ourselves and realize that a lot of our feelings, are things that we need to work on inwardly. So this is about caring for ourselves, and it's about being friendly, and he says here, the more unsustained I am, the more I will respect myself. He says Jane Eyre, E-Y-R-E said that. I think that's a famous writer in our history. So then we've got endangerment attacks. So number 10, drasticizing, catastrophizing, and hypochondricizing. I've been good at all 3 of those in my life. Being drasticizing, catastrophizing, and hypochondricizing. And that again comes from CPTSD. He says, I feel afraid, but I am not in danger. I am not in trouble with my parents, and I will not blow things out of proportion. I refuse to scare myself with thoughts and pictures of my life falling to pieces or deteriorating. No more homemade horror movies and disaster flicks. So we can do that to ourselves. We can make up our own horror movies in our heads, and you can catch yourself doing that as well. And when you do, begin to, call yourself out on it. Say, oh, wow, look what I'm doing. And that will begin to heal us as well. Number 11, negative focus. So this is something he says, I renounce over noticing and dwelling on what might be wrong with me or life around me. I will not minimize or discount my attributes. Right now, I notice and visualize and enumerate my accomplishments, talents, and qualities, as well as the many gifts life offers me: friends, nature, music, film, food, beauty, color, pets. And, if you just think about that list right now, no matter, whatever your day's been like, some days it's going to be harder than others, but, if you think of the word friends, and then you think nature, music, film, food, beauty, color, and pets, and you start getting all these images like flash before you in front of your, into our psyche. So, the idea of friends, certain people pop into my mind. When I think of nature, I think of beautiful flowers. Music, whatever we've listened to recently. And then the foods we're going to eat, and the beauty and color, and pets. Like if you've got a pet that you love, then you're going to click into that. Number 12, he says, is we need to look at time urgency. So we can put ourselves under a lot of pressure and put ourselves into flashbacks if we're running late. And we need to understand that we're not in danger, that we don't need to rush. And if we're late for something and that's putting us in a flashback, or we feel pressured, all we need to do is, send a text to a person, call somebody up, rearrange things, don't put yourself under unnecessary pressure. Unless you're in a true emergency, but then we can, we're human, so we need to deal with things realistically. He says here, also we can add, I am learning to enjoy doing my daily activities at a relaxed pace. So slowing down, you know, purposefully slowing down and being mindful is going to put us into a more relaxed pace. Number 13, disabling performance anxiety. So he says, I reduce procrastination by reminding myself that I will not accept unfair criticism or perfectionist expectations from anyone, even when I'm afraid. I will defend myself from unfair criticism, and I won't let fear make my decisions. So really, really important that, you know, to look at that. I used to have performance anxiety when I started making YouTubes, and now you know, some days I run really smooth and some days it's a bit more tricky for me and my words don't come out the way I want or whatever. And, you know, again, we just got to realize that we are human and to be gentle with ourselves. Number 14, it says, perseverating about being attacked. Unless, so this we can think about, unless there are clear signs of danger, I will stop my thought projection of past bully critics onto others. The vast majority of my fellow human beings are peaceful people. And this is the absolute truth. Like whatever we watch in the news, you know, this is the minimal stuff that's going on. Most people are decent. Most people have got a beautiful heart. And most people are kind. Going on, he says, and if we have problems with people, we've got legal authorities to aid us in protecting us and if threatened. And he says here, I invoke thoughts and images of my friends' love and support. So there you go. So I think there is a small list actually. I'm going to read on the 13 steps for managing flashbacks, which is useful. So this is a watered down version of the 13 flashbacks. I made it smaller for myself so I could carry it in my, you know, fold it over. This is a bit of paper. And I fold it over and I put it in my, carry it with me. I sort of fold it into, you know, like small pieces, and it's just good to carry around with you, put it in your wallet. So number one is when you get triggered and you feel yourself going into panic, you can say, number one, say to yourself, I am having a flashback. Number two, remind yourself, I feel afraid, but I am no longer in danger. Number three, own your right and need to have boundaries. So know that you can have boundaries and it's safe to have boundaries. Number four, speak reassuringly to your inner child. So really important to get a relationship going with your inner child. Number five, deconstruct eternity thinking. So, you know, remember that nothing is forever. So we can work through our problems, and where you're stuck, you know, go and get help or speak to somebody, if, you know, and just look at the tools that you can use. Number six is remind yourself that you are in an adult body with allies, skills and resources to protect you that you never had as a child, and feeling small and little is a sure sign that you're having a flashback. So when we feel that feeling of being small and we're afraid, that's how we felt when we were little. So, you know, we can bring ourselves back into our body. Number seven is ease yourself back into your body. Fear launches us into a heady worrying or numbing and spacing out. Number eight is resist the inner critic's drasticizing and catastrophizing. And number nine, allow yourself to grieve. So we've got to do our grief work. The first thing is Pete Walker says is that we work on the inner critic, then we're going to be able to do our grieving, you know, and that takes time. It could take, you know, maybe a year or two to fully grieve what you experienced in your life that was ignored by humanity and people. Flashbacks are opportunities to release old, unexpressed feelings of fear, hurt, and abandonment, and to validate and then soothe the child's past experience of helplessness and hopelessness. Healthy grieving can turn our tears into self-compassion and our anger into self-protection. So really worth knowing that. Number 10, cultivate safe relationships and seek support. So where you've got relationships that aren't safe, it's like begin to eliminate those people out of your life. Where they're not safe, it's safe to begin to eliminate. And some people are going to need help with that. Number 11, learn to identify the types of triggers that lead to flashbacks. So if you know that, you know, a certain place triggers you or a certain, you know, thing that triggers you, begin to eliminate them one by one out of your life. We can't eliminate every trigger out of our lives, but we, you know, if we write down a list of what triggers us, I know what triggers me and I know what those things are. And, you know, have them, I know in my head now, so I know what's good for me and what is not good for me. Number 12, figure out what you are flashing back to. So sometimes it's just, we don't know what we're flashing back to because we've got all of this unprocessed stuff which needs to be worked through. So you can go get therapy, you can read Pete Walker's book. There's a lot more you can do. Number 13, be patient with a slow recovery process because it is slow. And that's Pete Walker from the book Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, and the lists are below. So that's it. What I'm going to do later this week, I'm going to start looking at transforming core beliefs that were given to us as children. And we've all, you know, we all play out our core beliefs in different ways. So I'm going to do a bit of work on core beliefs and how we can begin to evolve into, you know, getting new belief systems going. So that's it for today. Whoever's been watching me, thanks for watching. I've got a ladies group over on Facebook. So, you know, if you're a lady, then just go over to my Facebook page and you'll be able to, the links are below, you'll be able to find that page. And if, you know, it's a good support. And if you're a guy and you're trying to, you know, you need groups, there's a couple I do know on Facebook, a couple of groups that are where there are mixed groups where men can join as well. Okay, I'll catch you later. Thanks for watching.